A man in a navy blue agbada moved carefully along a barely visible path, his Italian leather boots crunching dry leaves. Jonathan Okezie, one of Nigeria's quietest billionaires, rarely visited this stretch of his vast landholdings. Something unspoken had drawn him here today. His driver followed at a distance, carrying a leather file. Jonathan stopped. A sound too faint for most ears reached him. A child's rasp. He pushed through the undergrowth until he saw her. The billionaire dropped to his knees. The world narrowed to the weight of that child in his arms. 3 weeks earlier, everything had still been ordinary in the village of Umuaka. Adanna remembered the exact smell of the jollof rice Amara served her mother that afternoon. Too much scent of stock cube, too much smugness in Amara's smile. Bianca had eaten only 2 spoonfuls before the pain folded her in half. By the time Adanna returned from the stream with a calabash of water balanced on her small head, her mother was on the mud floor, clutching her stomach, foam at the corners of her mouth. Obina came home from the city, to a house full of wailing neighbors, and a wife he no longer recognized. Amara stood dry-eyed in the corner. "How should I know what happened?" she said when he asked. "I'm not God." He believed her, because grief is blinding, and because he had no one else. After the burial, Amara's mask slipped completely. The woman who had once cooed over Adanna now looked through her as if she was smoke. Obina begged on his knees. "Love her, Amara. We've prayed for a child. Maybe God will see your kindness and bless us." But Amara saw only a living reminder of the woman whose place she had taken. A child who might inherit before any son she could give Obina. Jealousy is a patient poison. One dawn, before the roosters, Amara dragged Adanna from sleep, shoved a small Niana bag into her arms, and marched her 2 hours into the forest. The child's feet bled. She begged. Amara never looked back. "Go," she said at the deepest part, pushing Adanna forward. "Animals will finish what I started." Then she walked away. She grew too weak even to cry loudly. She spoke to her mother's spirit under the stars. On the 22nd day, Jonathan found her. He carried her out himself, barking orders at doctors and pilots. Within hours she was in a private clinic in Enugu, glucose dripping into tiny veins. Sandra, Jonathan's soft-spoken wife, crying silently at the bedside. The couple had been childless for 12 years. They knew, without discussion, that the universe had just handed them their daughter. They named her Adanna Okezie on the adoption papers and never looked back. In the village, Amara played her role perfectly. Tears, torn wrappers, dramatic searches that led nowhere. Weeks turned to months. People moved on. Obina never did. Something in his spirit refused the story that his daughter had simply wandered off. They named her Adanna Okezie on the adoption papers and never looked back. In the village, Amara played her role perfectly. Tears, torn wrappers, dramatic searches that led nowhere. Weeks turned to months. People moved on. Obina never did. Something in his spirit refused the story that his daughter had simply wandered off, far away in Lagos. Adanna learned to smile again. She flinched at raised voices for years, but she also learned to read before kindergarten ended, to code before secondary school, to speak 4 languages before university. She graduated top of her software engineering class at 21. Hired on the spot by a Silicon Valley giant opening its Africa headquarters in Lagos, Jonathan and Sandra watched her collect awards with tears they no longer bothered to hide. Back in Umuaka, Amara's punishment arrived without announcement. It began with shadows in the corners of her eyes, then shapes dissolved. By the 3rd morning she was completely blind. Doctors found nothing physical. Herbalists and pastors delivered the same verdict. You offended an innocent soul. Until forgiveness comes from the one you wronged, light will not return. Obina's love curdled into disgust. He moved to the sitting room. He ate in the market. He stopped touching her. One thunderous night he demanded the truth again. Amara broke. "I left her in the forest to die," she sobbed. "I poisoned Bianca too. I wanted everything that was hers." Obina, aged 10 years in a minute. Years rolled on. Adanna was 24, vice president at 26, married at 28 to Mekok, the pilot with kind eyes and terrible jokes. She walked down the aisle between 2 fathers, Jonathan on her right, in gold-threaded agbada, Obina on her left in quiet brown. She gave birth to twins Bianca and Jonathan, and still the past slept quietly, until it didn't. A memory surfaced like a fish rising to light, her mother's voice days before the poisoning. "If anything happens to me, check the land papers, Adanna. Promise me." She was 5 when she made that promise. She was 30 when she kept it. It took her legal team 72 hours to unravel decades of fraud. Chief Etcherbina's cousin, the smiling family friend who brought condolence yams after Bianca's death, had forged signatures to steal ancestral land. Bianca had discovered the plot. Etch had supplied the poison and convinced Amara it was the perfect solution to 2 problems at once. The arrests were swift, the headlines louder. Chief Etch's empire collapsed in a week. Adanna visited him once in Kirikiri Maximum Prison. He looked small behind the bars. "You were never meant to matter," he spat. She leaned close enough for him to see the calm in her eyes. "I mattered the day I was born," she said. "You just didn't notice." She left without waiting for remorse. The recovered land funded the Bianca Adanna Hope Foundation shelters, schools, coding boot camps for girls who had been thrown away like she once was. Every year on the anniversary of her rescue, Adanna returned to that forest with her children. She planted a new mango tree at the exact spot and told them, softly, "This is where Mummy learned that surviving is only the first part. Thriving is the revenge." And somewhere, in a quiet grave, no one visited anymore. Amara's bones lay under a mound of red earth. She had taken her own life with the remnants of the same poison, whispering Adanna's name with her last breath. But that was a footnote. The real story, the one mothers now tell their daughters across Nigeria's, the girl who was left to die under a mango tree, and instead grew into the woman who taught a continent how to code its future. She didn't just survive, she rewrote the entire book. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, slipped under the gate of the house on the lagoon by a barefoot boy who vanished before the security cameras could catch his face. The envelope was cheap brown paper, the kind sold in village markets. Inside was a single sheet, handwriting shaky but deliberate. Adanna read it in her study while the Lagos rain drummed the glass roof. "Sister Adanna, I am writing with a borrowed pen because I have no right to anything of my own. My name is Chidi. I am Wazamara's nephew. She raised me after my mother died. Before she took the poison, Auntie made me swear to deliver this only when I was old enough to understand shame. I am 27 now. I understand. She left a box for you. She said it belongs to the only person she ever truly feared, because that person became good despite her. The box is buried under the kolanut tree behind the old house in Omuaka. I have never opened it. I am sorry for everything my blood did to yours. If you burn this letter and never come, I will understand. If you come, I will dig with my own hands. Chidi." Adanna read it 3 times. Then she called Mekok. "I'm going to the village," she said simply. He didn't ask why. He only booked the helicopter. 2 days later, under a sky the color of wet cement, Adanna stood again in the compound where her nightmares began. The house had collapsed inward years ago. Only the back wall and the old kolanut tree still stood. Chidi was waiting, thinner than memory, eyes lowered. He had brought a cutlass and a small shovel. They dug in silence. 10 minutes in, metal struck wood. The box was small, the size of a shoebox, wrapped in faded Ankara cloth, now rotted through. Inside, protected by a plastic bag, were 3 things. A cassette tape, labeled in Amara's handwriting, "For Adanna, when she is strong enough." A stack of photographs, Bianca pregnant, Bianca laughing, Bianca holding newborn Adanna, pictures Adanna had never seen. Pictures Amara must have hidden out of spite and then kept out of guilt. A second envelope, thick, sealed with candle wax. Inside was a confession, handwritten over many nights, dated the week before Amara died. Adanna read it sitting on the roots of the same tree that had watched her childhood die. "I poisoned your mother because I believed love was a pie and she had taken the whole thing. I left you in the forest because I thought if you were gone, the pie would finally be mine. I was wrong about everything. Love is not a pie. It is a seed. You were the seed I tried to kill, and you became the mightiest tree I ever saw. I watched you on television, heard your name on the radio, saw your face on billboards in Onitsha. Every time, I went blind again, not from curse but from shame. Forgiveness restored my eyes, but nothing restored my soul. I do not ask you to read this and feel pity. I ask you to read this and know the truth. Evil is real, but it is also stupid. It always loses, even when it wins for a season. Thank you for proving that. I am sorry I never said it while I still had breath." Amara, at the bottom of the box, lay one more item. The small silver bracelet Bianca used to wear. The one Adanna remembered clinging to her mother's wrist the day she died. Amara had pried it off the cooling body. Adanna closed the box. Rain began to fall harder. Chidi stood a respectful distance away, soaked. "I forgive you too," Adanna said to him, though he had done nothing. "Blood is not destiny." She took only the cassette tape and the bracelet. The rest she asked Chidi to burn. That night, in the quiet of her Lagos study, she played the tape on an ancient Walkman Jonathan had found in storage. Adanna closed the box. Rain began to fall harder. Chidi stood a respectful distance away, soaked. "I forgive you too," Adanna said to him, though he had done nothing. Blood is not destiny. She took only the cassette tape and the bracelet. The rest she asked Chidi to burn. That night, in the quiet of her Lagos study, she played the tape on an ancient Walkman Jonathan had found in storage. Amara's voice, thin and cracked by illness and regret, filled the room. "My name is Amara S. If you are listening, Adanna, then I am dead and you are great. I do not deserve the air your greatness breathes, but I will use my last minutes to return something I stole. Your mother did not beg for her life. She begged for yours. Her last words were not about the pain in her belly. They were, 'Tell Adanna she is enough. Tell her she must live. I never told you. I am telling you now. You were always enough. I was the one who was not. Live long, Adanna. Live so loudly that my small evil becomes a footnote even the devil forgets.'" The tape clicked off. Adanna sat in the dark for a long time, the silver bracelet cool against her wrist for the first time in 33 years. The next morning she did 3 things. First, she transferred a large sum quietly, anonymously to Chidi's account with the note, "Plant something that gives shade." Second, she founded a scholarship in amorous name not to honor her, but to cancel her. Every year, 20 girls from the poorest homes in Anambra State would study STEM fully funded in memory of the woman who taught us what we must never become. Third, she gathered her family Jonathan and Sandra now grey and proud, Obina softer with age and repentance. Mekok, the twins ant, flew to the forest. At the exact spot where she once lay dying, where she planted a mango sapling every year for 25 years, the trees had grown into a grove. She walked to the oldest tree, the first one she ever planted, and hung the silver bracelet on a low branch. Then she turned to her children. "This," she said, "is where the story tried to end me. Instead, this is where I began again. Every time you eat a mango from these trees, remember, somebody meant it for poison, and it became your sweetness." Little Bianca, now 10 and fierce, asked, "Will we come back every year, Mummy?" "Every single year," Adanna promised, "until these trees are older than pain itself." And they did. Long after Adanna's hair turned silver, long after her code ran half the payment systems in Africa, long after the Bianca Adanna Hope Foundation had rescued and educated 30,000 girls, people still made pilgrimage to that grove. They called it Adanna's Cathedral. Under the leaves, the silver bracelet still hung, catching sunlight, flashing like a quiet warning and an eternal promise. "You tried to bury us. You did not know we were seeds." By the time Adanna was 55, the mango trees had woven their branches so tightly that sunlight fell in gold coins on the forest floor. Children from the village school built by the foundation and named after Bianca came every Founder's Day to picnic beneath them, chasing each other with sticky fingers and shouting Auntie Adanna. Whenever she visited, she always came alone on the actual anniversary of the rescue, the 22nd of October. Mekok had learned not to accompany her anymore. This was the one day she needed the trees to speak without human voices in the way. On the 33rd anniversary, she arrived at dawn. The air was cool, the way it only ever is in Igboland before the harmattan remembers to bite. She wore a simple white linen dress and the silver bracelet that had never left her wrist since the day she reclaimed it. In her hand she carried a small calabash of palm wine and a single kola nut. She walked a familiar path between the trunks until she reached the oldest tree, the first sapling she had planted with trembling 10-year-old fingers. The bracelet still hung from the same low branch, now polished bright by decades of rain and sun. Adanna poured a libation at the roots. "For you, Mama," she whispered. "For Jonathan and Sandra who wait for me on the other side now. For every girl who will never have to eat unripe mangoes to stay alive." She broke the kola nut, placed one lobe at the foot of the tree, and ate the other. Then she sat back against the trunk and let the grove hold her the way Jonathan once had. She did not expect an answer, but the wind shifted and something small and hard dropped into her lap. A seed, a single mango seed, pale and perfect. Adanna laughed out loud. the sound startling a flock of weaver birds into the sky. She turned the seed over in her palm, feeling the weight of 1,000 unwritten stories inside it. That afternoon, she called a meeting, not of board members or ministers or journalists. She had long grown tired of those. She called the girls, the current residents of the Hope Foundation shelter in Onitsha, 63 girls between 6 and 17 who had been rescued from traffickers, witch-branding pastors, forced marriages, or in 3 heartbreaking cases, stepmothers who had tried the same forest trick Amara once used. She gathered them under the biggest tree. "I was you," she told them simply, "and you are me. Today we start something new." She held up the seed. "This grove is 33 trees old. By the time I am gone, I want it to be 33,000. Not just here, everywhere someone once tried to bury a girl and failed. Every shelter, every safe house, every village square where a girl child is told she is less, we will plant a mango grove. And every girl who passes through our hands will plant the first tree with her own name carved into the bark." One of them, a tiny 9-year-old named Kioma, whose stepfather had sold her for a motorcycle, raised a trembling hand. "Auntie, what if the trees die?" Adanna knelt so their eyes were level. "Then we plant again, and again, until the ground itself learns that girls do not stay buried." That year the first new groves went in. Abuja, Kano, Maiduguri, Calabar, even across the border in Benin Republic and Ghana, where the foundation had quietly begun working. Every tree carried a small metal tag, planted by girl's name in memory of those who tried to kill us and proof that they lost. Adanna lived to see 10,000 trees. She died quietly at 78, on the rooftop of the lagoon house, Mekok holding one hand, her twins now brilliant adults themselves holding the other, and her grandchildren singing her the Igbo lullaby Bianca used to hum. They buried her ashes beneath the oldest tree in the original grove. No coffin, no tombstone, just a simple bronze plaque hammered into the trunk at child height. Adanna, Okezi Niyum, 1987, 2065. She refused to stay buried. So we keep growing. Years later, travelers on the new Enugu-Onitsha expressway began noticing something strange. From the air, the groves, now numbering in the hundreds, formed a pattern across eastern Nigeria, a giant spiral made of living green, visible only when the mangoes were in season and the leaves turned gold. Pilots called it the Adanna spiral. Satellite images went viral. Botanists came to study it. Old women in the villages simply smiled and said, "She always did like to sign her name large." And every October, on the 22nd, no matter where in the world they are, girls who were once rescued plant one more tree. They pour palm wine at the roots. They hang a silver bracelet, cheap ones now, mass-produced by the Foundation's jewelry workshop on the lowest branch, and they whisper the same words Adanna taught them. "You tried to bury us. You did not know we were seeds." The grove keeps growing. The spiral widens, and somewhere, in whatever place spirits watch from, a little girl who once lay dying under a mango tree finally closes her eyes in perfect peace, because the story did not end with her rescue. It only began there.